Greetings and salutations, friends, and welcome back to yet another army video where we will be, of course, taking a look at the High Elves of Ulthuan. Now, the army of the High Elves is essentially a citizen militia. However, while normally a citizen militia would mean that, they'd be pretty bad at fighting, seeing as they're, citizens, so they haven't received full military training. However, in the case of Ulthuan, this is not quite the case, simply because an elf can live for thousands of years. He has no shortage of time to be trained in, so they are pretty damn good soldiers. In fact, they are considerably better fighters than the vast majority of other races in the Warhammer world. However, they've got one considerable drawback. They are all toughness 3. All of them. Even their elite units, toughness 3. Which isn't that bad, really, when you think, like, oh, that's just the same toughness as a human, but they've got higher weapon skills, so of course they're better than humans, yeah? Yeah, they are. But here's the thing. Toughness 3 means that even your ridiculously expensive elite units are only as tough as your average human. And your enemies, well, they've got a lot of stuff that's really good at killing average human toughness units, so they are certainly a bit of a, I hesitate to call them glass cannon army, because they can be quite resilient if properly built, but they are certainly a brittle army. You could perhaps compare them to a knight's lance, You're on a horse, you've got a lance, you've got an incredibly powerful punch with your weapon, but the weapon is also rather brittle, and if it is not delivered expertly, it's going to shatter. But I say citizen militia, so what do I mean by this? Well, the citizen militia can mean many things, but in this case it means that there is mandatory conscription across all layers of High Elf society. The nobles have to serve in the army, although they get a bit more of a say as to where they serve. All of the normal citizens have to serve in the army as archers and as spearmen. In some areas of Ulthuan, you have some freedom to choose which branch of the services, so to say, you are to join, but in the vast majority of cases, each elf is expected to bring his own gear and is outfitted only by the Phoenix King himself in special circumstances. So you do have some limitations as to cost, meaning that the wonderful elven steeds are usually only used by elf nobility. Now, that is not to say that most citizens do not own a steed, they do, but in battlefield conditions, one steed is never enough. You need backups. You need something to ride while you're traveling to the battle. You might need a backup that is ready and rested for the battle. The horse might be killed, etc. As such, a cavalryman is expected to not keep one horse, but usually a stable of them, which somewhat limits the availability of their, numbers. In some cases, citizens can also be trained to pilot chariots, for example, although that's more rare because, again, you're kind of expected to bring your own chariot with the horses. But considering these are usually from the lands of Tiranoc, where chariots and horses often go in inheritance, so to say, a lot of lower families have built up a considerable amount. But these are exceptions rather than the rule. In the vast majority of cases, all elf citizens are trained as spearmen and as archers, and can usually fulfill both roles if called upon to do so. There is one exception, however. The High Nobles. The High Nobles have a say in where they serve. They may essentially demand to be put in the Silver Helms, and they might also demand to actually be given their equipment, although it is usually considered poor form to do so. They may also enter the Chariot Corps, they may enter the Archers, they may become captains, more or less by birthright rather than outright merit, although there are cases where they have been able to, bar a particularly worthless individual from positions of responsibility, but in the vast majority of cases, friends at the Phoenix King's court or in high positions is more than enough to get you your stripes as at the very least a sergeant, without actually, having to work for it or, hell, even learn how to be a sergeant. But with that quick description out of the way, who do I think is going to be the leader of the High Elves if they're at it? Well, I think it's going to be Finnebar the Seafarer. Now, we don't actually have any stats for him, as he's not technically a hero within the tabletop game, but being an elf, you can assume that he's a pretty big badass when it comes to fighting, but he's not particularly tough. Again, a bit of the whole lance metaphor. Alternatively, we might be seeing a scenario where we're not fighting in Ulthuan. Let's say that we're still fighting in the old world, the Empire, that kind of stuff, but Finnebar the Seafarer has dispatched one of his trusted lieutenants to fight for him with an High Elven expeditionary force. In which case, we might see this force led by, for example, Tyrion, one of the most broken special characters in the entire game. And not without reason, the bastard has a weapon skill 9 out of a maximum 10, initiative 10, 4 attacks, strength 7 for an elf, and a magical flaming attack, because why not? Hell, he even comes with a breath weapon. He's insane. He can wreck entire units by himself without any real problems. His only downside is the fact that he also has toughness of 3, which means that a lucky shot can indeed kill him, but seeing as he moves ridiculously fast on that mount of his, plus ward save, plus armor, plus his ability to negate killing blows, yeah. Oh, and by the way, I'd like to mention this one. You see, he has a 4+ ward save, yeah? That's pretty damn ridiculous. 4+, 50% chance to just ignore damage. Magic resistance of 2, so he's got a pretty damn good chance of just ignoring magic as well. And a 1+ armor save, so yeah. And here's the thing. He has a magical necklace from the Ever Queen, and this wonderful little doodah means that any wound that would have killed the Tyrion allows him to just shrug it off on a 2+. A 2+, okay? So yeah, killing the bastard is problematic, let's just say. So it would be cool to see him. You could see his brother, Teclix, the Lawmaster, one of the greatest mages of the Warhammer world. He could. Or, you know, we could see a less known person, for example, Caradrin, the captain of the Phoenix Guard, which would make sense. Or Corihil, captains of the White Lions, the bodyguards, Finnebar the Seafarer, might see him as well. But I think we're probably going to see Finnebar himself, or at least I hope so. Moving on to the more standard heroes, we start out with the Lord-level characters with the High Elf Prince. The Prince is, well, he's a High Elf in every single way, really. He has remarkable offensive capabilities with weapon skill of 7, initiative 8, always strikes first, so the initiative doesn't even really matter at that point. And if you kit him out properly with magical items, he is just absurd. However, he's very expensive. He's very fragile. He's not particularly tough, toughness 3 as everyone else. He has got a reasonable armor save, but that's not going to be saving him from a, cannon or a bolt thrower. Plus, even though he only technically has 2+ armor save, which is enough in most cases, he still only has a 2+ armor save, which means that if you throw enough arrows at the bastard, odds are some of them might actually get through. And since he doesn't have a whole lot of hit points or toughness, throwing enough mud at this particular wall will almost certainly guarantee that some of it is going to be sticking. However, here's the thing. A lord, a prince, can ride a dragon, which is pretty good, gracious god levels of amazing. The dragons are fantastic mounts. They're expensive mounts, don't get me wrong, extremely expensive, and should be extremely limited in a Warhammer game if they can even add them, because, well, ridiculously powerful, you know? A high elf prince on a dragon could just sweep right through multiple units. How the hell do you actually balance that in a total wargame? And, not sure they can, honestly. Well, first of all, limitations, extreme limitations, because they are bloody dragons. I'd probably say something like 3 dragons total for the entire High Elf faction, and even that might be a bit much. But here's the thing, the dragons are divided into 3 types: the Sun Dragon, Moon Dragon, and Star Dragon, with the Sun Dragon being the smallest and the Star Dragon being the biggest, most horrifying thing that exists practically in tabletop, really. Let me just, the stat line of the Star Dragon, yeah? Weapon skill 7, so he is the equal of the prince that's riding him. Strength 7 out of a maximum 10. Toughness 7. 7 wounds. 6 attacks. And a strength 4 breath weapon. And a 3+ armor save. It's insanity. It's proper insanity. And add in the fact that the prince can attack from its back, and yeah, you've got a just insane unit. I think, in all due likelihood, you should be able to have maybe 2 or 3 Sun Dragons, because they're not all that tough. Like a good battery of artillery, some bolt throwers, and elite unit will deal with them. The Moon Dragons, yeah, it's pretty damn good, but it's not Star Dragon good. Maybe you should have 2 of them, perhaps, maybe? Now, you see, this is the problem. I want you to have all of them, but you have to limit them, so... 2 Sun Dragons? Okay, 2 Sun Dragons. So you can recruit 2 Sun Dragons, and you can mount them with your princes. And then you get the Moon Dragon through an event with a particularly powerful High Elf Archmage on the back of it. And you get the Star Dragon through an event with a special prince on his back. So you only get 1 of each, but still, they're just that good, okay? They're just fantastic, and they require a concerted effort from your opponent to take care of them. And that's the thing. If he has to dedicate a ton of firepower to taking care of your dragon, and that's a ton of firepower not directed towards your swordmasters, or your phoenix guard, or hell, your phoenixes, or your griffins, or your great eagles, or your chariots, or one of the million other fantastically powerful units at the elves' disposal, so you can probably see the problem there. Back to the point, though. The noble himself is a fantastic combat character, but he's squish. He's gonna struggle against Chaos Lords unless he can kill them right off the bat. He'll eat human characters for breakfast, not a problem. Even Karl Franz himself is gonna have a wee bit of a struggle with a High Elf Prince because of Always Strikes First, which could be bad, very bad. So I'm almost tempted to say you should limit the nobles too. Maybe, I think maybe they'll limit themselves though. Just say that, okay, you start out with a noble families, yep? So you start out with 5 nobles, okay? You start with 5 nobles, you get 5 nobles. If one of them dies, essentially a new noble will come to replace him if you fall into like 3, say. Like, you've lost 2. That's a little bit annoying. You don't want too many limitations on that, so if you lost 2 of them, the replacements will come from Old One eventually. In like 20 turns or a reasonably long period of time, you will eventually get replacements, but it's going to take a while, or it's going to be ridiculously expensive, because you need to limit them a little bit, because they have the potential to be so ridiculously powerful. But yeah, glass cannons. Damn good glass cannons, but glass cannons nonetheless. Moving on, we have the mage, which is, well, it's a mage. It's not very hard to figure out what he does, but the High Elves are pretty damn good at magic, though. They are actually really good at magic. They have access to high magic, which they're the, well, there are 2 races that can use it. The Slans, which can use all magic, and the High Elves. So they have access to a ton of very, well, versatile magic. They've got good offensive magics, they've got good defensive magics, and defensive magics with the elves. Giving ward save to a unit, for example, fantastic stuff. They're very flexible. They shouldn't really... I'm kinda wanting to say they should be limited, but no, not really. Like, as a high elf, you should have access to all of the mages you really want. But again, since we don't actually know how the magic system is going to work, I'm just going to quietly continue on. I'm going to make a magic video once we know how it will actually work, and if we get all the details, fantastic, I'll make an analysis video of it. If we don't, if I just have the groundworks, you know, a basic on how it's going to work, I can probably speculate and extrapolate a fair bit from that, so I will make a video on that when we have some actual information. Moving on, we have the Dragon Mage, which is... it's a mage, but it's riding a dragon. So, yeah, it's another dragon. What more do you want? It's another dragon, and it's got a mage on his back. Honestly, I don't really see the need to include this as its own unit. Just give the player the one hero, so to say, level mage riding a moon dragon, and that should probably be fine, honestly. Because, of course, if you get to recruit mages riding dragons, that's going to be a bit of a balance problem, yeah. Next up, we have the Handmaiden of the Everqueen, a Valkyrie, or an Amazon, wherever you might come from, a warrior woman, essentially. She's a ranged hero, mostly. The only reason you'd take her is if you've got Handmaidens of the Everqueen. Or, well, you know, maidens, as they're called, not handmaidens. A decent enough infantry unit, and she gives them quick to fire, which essentially lets them shoot faster, so, you know, relatively simplistic. You give her a magical bow, for example, and you can use her ballistic skill of 7, which is pretty damn insane. Like I said, a magic bow adds in the Reaver bow, for example, and you'll total out at 3 ballistic skill 7, strength 5 shots. So yeah, that's pretty damn good. She's pretty damn expensive considering she's essentially just a glorified archer, but if you've got a unit of maidens, because, you know, we need to separate the two. Anyways, if you have a unit of them, or if they're available in Total War Warhammer, I'd like to see them as a unique unit. Just make them pretty damn powerful, because they are, and then let them be led by a handmaiden, which can of course also be a general. And, well, she's such a specialized character that I kind of want her to be unique, because, you know, on the other hand, you could make the argument that you should be able to have her and just put her in a unit of high elf archers, which would certainly help, but, yeah, I'd kind of like her to be a special unit, so maybe. Last for the heroes, we have the so-called Sea Helm, which is, well, a captain, essentially. And he has a very interesting rule. He's not particularly special, he's a decent combat character and everything, but here's the thing. In Warhammer Tabletop, you have something called a reform. Essentially, if the unit wants to change direction drastically, like if it wants to turn 180 degrees to the right, it has to spend an entire turn doing so, reforming the unit. However, the Sea Helm has a special ability that means that if the unit didn't stand or shoot or flee, it can reform for free when it gets charged, which means that if you charge the unit with the Sea Helm into it, in the flank, the Sea Helm can go like, special rule, and reform so that you're fighting the front of the unit, which is incredibly powerful in Tabletop. How you would implement this in Total War, I'm not entirely sure. Not sure at all, really. You could maybe just give them a movement bonus when they get charged, for example, something along those lines. You could do that. Maybe you could give them a bonus against charge, you know, just make them more, you know, sturdy. You could do that. But implementing the rule directly as it is, probably hard, yeah. But still, an interesting enough unit that could be certainly useful, no doubt about that. Now, that being it for the heroes, I'd like to just touch upon a couple other, technically Lord-level characters, really. You've got the Lore Master of Hoeth, which is, you know, a bigger, badder mage. He's one of those kind of strange units that the High Elves got relatively recently, because he's a mage, but he's also a sword master. He's almost a special character, really. I believe you are limited to have one of them in your army, but it's been a while since I read the High Elf army book, the newest one, so I cannot be entirely sure about that, but I'm reasonably sure you can only have one of them, and you can only have one of the Anointed of Azurion, which is the other ones. They're essentially Phoenix God captains, even bigger, even badder Phoenix God. The Anointed of Azurion, though, I don't really want to see him as a hero, I want to see him as a special unit, because he can ride a Phoenix, a Flamespire Phoenix, and he's the only one who can, so... I'd prefer, honestly, to see him as a special character. You know, there's a lot of special character stuff with the High Elves because they've got a lot of unique stuff, and I'd really like to see an Anointed Vasurian on top of a Flamespire Phoenix. Because, well, it would be a cool unit just looking at it, and it would be a rather fantastic melee unit as well. But I digress. Back to the Lore Master, yeah? He's a Sword Master, which means he's an amazing close combat fighter, and a mage. Which presents a bit of a balance problem in Total Wargame. Now, this is purely speculation, but let's assume that the mages are capable of casting buffing magic, offensive magic via a card system or something along those lines. Now you've suddenly got a mage that could potentially be casting relatively powerful spells in the front ranks of a unit, and he can defend himself. I'm pretty sure you can see the potential problems with that. You could solve it by limiting his magics. For example, he can only use a magic missile, for example. Or maybe he can only use a buff spell, something like that. But he's one of those characters that I kinda want to just have as a special character, you know? Because he's so versatile, I'm kinda having a bit of trouble seeing how you can actually implement the poor bastard in a Total War game, because, well, let's say they make mages magical artillery, yeah? Now he's even more powerful, so... It's an interesting unit, but I'm not entirely sure how they would implement it. But again, that depends on how they actually implement magic, so I shan't touch upon it too much. Instead, I think we will simply move on to the core units, where we start out with the good old-fashioned Spearmen. And this is a fascinating unit, because it defies the laws of physics. You see, High Elf Spearmen, when they get charged, first of all, they have the always strikes first, which means they always strike first in a turn-based rule system of Warhammer. All High Elves units, in fact, have always strike first. How they would implement that in a Total War game, not entirely sure. Maybe just give them a bonus attack before everyone else gets attacked, something like that. It could work out, wouldn't be too problematic. But here's the thing. If the unit of Spearmen is charged, they fight in 4 ranks with basic spears, and, well, the laws of physics states that, oh no you don't, simply because your spears aren't that bloody long. The excuse in the fluff is that the unit is so perfectly drilled together that they can continuously dodge and weave out of each other's ways, so they can all fight simultaneously, but how the hell would you even do that in a Total War game? I'm not entirely sure. We can pretty much rule out right away the option of actually having a unit be that fluid, you know, so that the unit is animated to continuously dodge and weave back and forth within the unit, having everyone attack in turn. That would be... yeah. With the Warscape engine? No, I can't see that happening. I hope I'm proved wrong, but yeah, I don't think so. So, how do you represent that? Well... give them extra long spears would be a good one, but even then, they're not pikes, so, you know, it did look a bit weird. I'm not entirely sure, really. Like, the basic unit itself is relatively simple. They're spearmen. They're very good spearmen, with very good stat line, but extremely expensive, so, you know, lots of upkeep, high cost. That's not a problem. But how the hell do you actually represent the fact that the bastards fight in 4 ranks, or 3 on the charge, by the way, so not quite as ridiculous. But yeah, how do you actually represent that? Don't honestly know. If you can't animate the unit to dodge and weave back and forth like they supposedly do, how would you do it? Would you just flat out give them pikes? I mean, that would look strange, because, you know, they're spearmen. Their spears aren't actually that long. They're, what, 1.5 the time of times the length of a elf, roughly, so 2 meters, 3 meters tops. No, not even that much. But yeah, like, they're definitely not pikes, you know, so not sure about that one. I guess you could just give them pikes, but I would, like, I don't want them to just give them an attack bonus either, to, like, you know, just represent the fact that they're fighting in multiple ranks, because that just doesn't do the unit justice, really. So, I don't know, maybe give them a special formation that kind of works like a shield wall, maybe? You know, they just drag, they get gathered up really tightly, so they can kinda fight in 4 ranks, and you give them a little bit longer spears. Could work, I suppose. I don't really see any other way to do it, if I am honest, but, well, we'll have to wait and see if Creative Assembly decides to surprise us on that one at some point in the future. Other than that, though, the unit is a relatively standard spear unit, except it is very, very good at what it does. It's got medium armor, I believe, and they've got, well, spears, of course, so bonus against cavalry, and they're very expensive because of their very high stat line, very high weapon skill and these things. A unit of 60 spearmen, so a horde-sized unit, would set you back 565 points. To put that into perspective, in the average-sized game of roughly 2,000 points, that's over a fourth of your total point allocation, so yeah. On the other hand, that allows you to essentially make a 5-rank unit, which means that only 10 of those spearmen cannot attack, yeah? So if you charge this, you are facing 50 attacks at very high weapon skill, so yeah. And they always strike first, so yeah, they're pretty damn insane to say the absolute least. In a total wargame, I think you probably want to limit them a bit. I kinda would like to say that the High Elf army, every single High Elf unit, should be smaller than the units of other races. I kinda want to say the same for the dwarfs, to be honest, but, you know, it's a bit hard to really judge. So if we say that the standard unit is 120, yeah, I would probably want the High Elves to be about 100. 20 dudes less, something along those lines. Be fair, it would represent the fact that they should be heavily outnumbered. In a full 40v40 double stack fight, they should be outnumbered by a couple thousand dudes, essentially. So there needs to be some way to represent that, and I think just lowering the unit size a bit is probably a good idea, and just help them out by giving them better stats, because, you know, they're High Elves. As for the rest of the units, I'd also like them to see them at 100 units, so essentially all the basic infantry, spearmen, archers, and Lothran Sea Guard I would like to see at 100 models. Speaking of these units though, let's move on to the archers. The High Elf archers are fantastic archers, well, great archers really, they're about as good as their Wood Elf counterparts. They've got longbows and 4 ballistic skill, which means they're pretty damn effective. And with the always strike first special rule and high weapon skill, they can fight light cavalry. They're not quarrelers level of light cavalry immune, like a decent unit of light cavalry will beat them, but they will certainly make a fight out of it. And again, I'd like to see them at 100 men, which is 20 less than I suggested for the Wood Elf archers, and the reason for that is simply because the Wood Elves are, you know, better archers. They've got more of them, so I'd kinda like, again, to see the archers of the High Elves just a little bit limited, you know? Because, well, they are pretty damn good. They got light armor, they've got longbows, high ballistic skill, and always strikes first. They are by no means slouches in any way, shape, or form. But other than that, they're a reasonably standard archer unit. What is not, however, a reasonably standard archer unit is the Lothran Sea Guard. The Lothran Sea Guard, you see, have medium armor, which means they're a fair bit tougher than their archer counterpart. They're not quite as tough as their spearman counterpart in tabletop. However, here's the thing. The Lothran Sea Guard have spears and shields, just like their spearman counterparts, but they also have bows. So you have an insanely flexible unit that can fire ranged weapons with good ballistic skill, and then fight it out like all other High Elf units in bloody 4 ranks when charged, making them an incredibly powerful unit, especially in a total wargame. Like, can you imagine? You'd get off 3, maybe even 4 volleys of archer fire, and instead of having to retreat, you just stand there, you brace your units, and now you're fighting with a perfectly adequate spearman unit. The potential impact on an enemy army could be catastrophic, honestly. Like, imagine an entire army of these bastards. Like, honestly, you could make an entire army of them, just all of them. Entire army, Lothran Sea Guard. Just 20 units of Lothran Sea Guard firing in 2 ranks, and it would work. So, I'd probably say that they should have some limitations, not too much, like, they're only the guards of a single city, you know, so they are somewhat limited. I'd probably say that you could have 10 of them, yeah, 10? Or you could make them ridiculously expensive, but honestly, making stuff expensive never really works. When you get to a certain point in a Total War game, you're gonna have practically infinite money anyways. So I'd really rather just see a simple cap on them, rather than even just try and balancing them out for money, because then you end up in a situation where early game, you can't afford them, and late game, you might not want them, you know? So yeah, I prefer a cap to that, but oh well, there are many different opinions in that particular question. Then we will move on to some mounted elves, where we start out with the Silver Helms, the supposedly dwindling flower of high elf nobility, although considering they're a core choice, they can't be that bloody dwindling, but oh well. Anyways, the Silver Helms, yeah, they are pretty damn good cavalry. They are fantastic cavalry, really. But they're also fantastically expensive, weighing in at 23 points in tabletop, which means that a full unit of Silver Helms, yeah, they're gonna set you back an absolutely horrendous amount of points. In tabletop, I think you should probably make them a little bit less expensive. Allow us to have quite a few of them, because they're an integral part of the High Elf army, and they look amazing, so you probably want quite a few of them. Armed with the good old-fashioned spears and shields with a sword for up-close melee combat, they are somewhat, however, limited when it comes to their abilities, shall we say. The reason for this is the fact that they are reasonable charges. They're nothing wrong with their charge, but they're not quite, you know, Empire or Bretonia level charge. But they're faster than these units too, so that's the thing. They can get around the flanks and do flank charges much more easily. And like I'm saying, you shouldn't be imagining it for even a second that the High Elves Silver Helms have a weak charge. By no means, no. They will deliver an absolute whooping on the charge, but here's the thing. Bretonians need to break the enemy on the charge, yes, but High Elves have to break the enemy on the charge. No two ways about it. Your Toughness 3 High Elves are not going to be winning a grinding match against anything, so you need to be sure that when you dedicate them to a charge, you gotta make sure they win fast, or they are going to get pulled out of the saddle damn quickly, and considering the cost of the unit, that's definitively not something you want happening. As for the unit size, standard heavy cavalry size of 60 models, I don't really see a problem with that. They're not that fantastic because they break on the charge, and you can't really nerf them all that much or have them have that few units, because if you punt them down to 40, for example, they're not going to have the frontage needed to actually inflict the full force of that charge, so I'd be fine with them being in a unit of 80, no real problems. Last of the core units, we have the Illyrian Reavers, which are horse archers. Really, 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 really good horse archers, and really, really fast horse archers. And, well, there's not that much to say about them, really. They're really, really good horse archers. What more do you need to know? Send them off to harass your enemy and piss him the hell off by constantly running in, firing a bunch of high elf bows at high ballistic skill, and then running off laughing like a little schoolgirl. Pretty damn simple to use, and very, very effective. As with High Elf steeds, they're probably going to be outpacing most other light cavalry. Of course, if they get a unit of Empire Outriders or Pistoliers on their arse, well, they're gonna have a little bit of a problem because they can outrun them, sure, but they are going to be getting shot by pistols at the same time, so, you know, you need to be a little bit careful of them because they are elves, they are pretty damn expensive, and they are not that tough. As for unit size, I'd probably say that these should come in 60 models. Not standard light cavalry of 80, but 60, because High Elves, they're really, really good horse archers, and horse archers are powerful enough at the worst of times, so limit them somewhat in their numbers, just so you can't have entire armies of these bastards, because frustrating, really. And also, a unit of horse archers just... it wouldn't really work as an army in the Total War Warhammer universe if they do it anywhere near the actual Warhammer universe, because there's a lot of armor in Warhammer, meaning that limited numbers of horse archers shouldn't really have that much effect on a full army stack. Of course, they shouldn't be limited since they are a core unit, so if you want an entire army of Illyrian Reavers, and I can definitely see why you would want to, then go right ahead. Just expect that your opponent, should you be playing multiplayer, is going to have some rather choice words for you and the possible sexual integrity of your mother. You have been warned. But enough with the boring-ass core choices, let's move on to the proper cookie jar, shall we, of the High Elves, the special unit, and we start out in style with the Swordmasters of Hoeth. These bastards are powerful, and they're probably going to be your premier answer to large, nasty units. The reason for this is that they are, well, essentially religiously convinced that they are there to root out all forms of chaos, and as such, they don't spook easily, and they've got two-handed greatswords which they wield with 2 attacks, weapon skill 6, strength 5, and again, they attack in 3 ranks. How the hell you are supposed to be attacking with greatswords in 3 ranks? Don't even ask me at this point, but yeah, we'll have to wait and see how the hell they're actually going to pull that off. However, it being fantastic two-handed units by any account, and by the way, normally great weapons means that he always strikes last, but High Elves always strikes first, and that trumps the always strikes last rule for their weapons. So, they're hitting first in 3 ranks, weapon skill 6, strength 5 great weapons, twice. So yeah, they're nasty, shall we just say. However, they do have a couple drawbacks. The most obvious is the fact that they're elves with toughness 3, and they only get light armor. And they only get an armor save of 5, and 1 wound. Plus, they're very expensive, which means that they are going to fall like absolute flies to a coordinated attack. However, they're not completely defenseless against ranged attacks. Being Swordsmasters of Hoeth, they are amazing swordsmen, and they have the ability to just simply bat arrows out of the air with their incredible elven reflexes, and as such, they've got a basic ward save, which I'd like to be represented in the game this time, not as a ward save, meaning that they'd be able to, you know, bat cannonballs out of the bloody sky, but just give them a special stance, for example. Give them a prepared stance, or an advancing stance, in which they got massively increased defense against, you know, basic ranged attacks. Crossbows and arrows. They're probably not going to be swiping a, you know, bullet out of the air anytime soon, but, you know, massive defense against arrows and crossbows. I'd like to see that. It'd just be a little bit of a nod to the fluff, you know? As for unit size, now this is where stuff gets interesting, yeah? Because 100 units of Swordmasters of Hoeth, that sounds ridiculously powerful. But at the same time, I don't really want to make them smaller than that. I don't really, because they look amazing. I'm sorry, that's my only real reason there. They look fantastic and I want 100 of them. But, you know, that might be OP, especially if Creative Assembly somehow makes them fight in 3 ranks. Like, essentially you're fighting an entire unit of 100 at the same time. They would absolutely just annihilate anything in front of them, so I'm a little bit hard-pressed to justify the numbers of 100 here, but what you could do, again, you could lower their numbers to like 80 and then let you recruit a fair number of them, or you could just put a cap on them, which honestly I think they should have anyway, because the Swordmasters of Hoeth are kind of rare, and they are often engaged in inquisitorial duties rather than just good old-fashioned fighting. So I'd probably say that if you're a High Elf expedition in the Empire, I mean, they would be even rarer, so maybe you'd get 3 of them total? 2, 3? Yeah, 3. 3 is enough to give you a decent taste of what they can do in massed numbers, and not quite enough to completely break the game, or at least I hope. Moving on, we've got another super powerful special unit, and there's going to be quite a few of those. We have the Phoenix Guard. They are arguably the best unit in the High Elf army list, and they are probably, to be honest, the best unit in the entire goddamn game. As well, you've got Halberd, with weapon skill 5, strength 4, initiative 6, always strikes first, so who cares, leadership 9, and here's the thing, heavy armor, which is quite rare in the High Elf army, and they cause fear. Why do they cause fear? Because they've taken an oath to never speak, that's why, so they're really, really stoic bastards that are butchering you and your friends with giant-ass halberds with fantastical skill being completely silent. So, yeah, I can see how that would be just a wee bit unnerving. And, again, they attack in 3 ranks, so, yeah. Plus, oh, if that's not enough, I mean, let's just throw on a 50% ward save on top of that, a 4+ ward save. Yeah, that sounds good. And it goes 15 points. Negligible amount more than a spearman, so, you know, ridiculous. If you throw in a hero in the unit, like a prince or something, yeah. They're so good that in a High Elf army they are an automatic pick. Like, you don't see a High Elf army without Phoenix Guard, it just doesn't happen, because they're fantastic. And because they're so fantastic, they're also quite limited in the fluff. So, I'd probably say that you should be able to have about 3 units of Phoenix Guard, same as Swordsmasters of Hoeth. But I would have these guys come in units of 80, simply because they're that good, and if you're going to be giving them a 50% ward save, then yeah, I think they're going to have to be in a unit of 80, because, I mean, they bounce cannonballs off their faceplates. Come on. Yeah, you're going to have to limit the bastard in some way, to be honest. But, of course, they aren't the only elite units in the High Elves army, not even the only elite melee unit in the High Elves army. Next up, we have the White Lions of Krace, the elite bodyguard of the Phoenix King. 200 axes this time, strength 6, with always strikes first, and again, fighting in multiple ranks, so yeah. They're still relatively weak on the defensive side though, as they still have toughness of 3 like everybody else, but again, strength 6 great weapons, and always strike first. They are just monster killers extraordinaire. Like, the High Elf army has no problems with large enemy monsters. In fact, if you bring large monsters in your army to fight a High Elf, you know your likelihood the bastard is just going to smile at you and laugh quietly. They're that good, so yeah. Again, this unit I want to see strictly limited. I want to see like 1 of these, unless you are led by Finubar the Seafarer himself, in which case fine, have 3 of them. And additionally, by the way, they're stubborn, so, you know, they don't run away either. Like, they are... you could call them a jack-of-all-trades units, perhaps. Like, they're fantastic offense, fantastic defense. You know, they're a jack-of-all-trade, where in any other army they'd be the best units you probably could have available, but in a High Elf army, you know, they're just kind of good at everything. Ooh, High Elf players have it good. As for unit size, you could probably have 100 of these. They're not Phoenix Guard level retarded, so as long as you've got a bit of a limitation on them, either through a hard unit cap or a total unit cost that is so abhorrent that you can't actually have that many of them, yeah, you could probably have 100 of them without too much problems. Next, we have the Dragon Princes of Caledor, and while they no longer ride dragons, thank the heavens, they still hit like an absolute goddamn avalanche. On the charge, they are probably pound for pound the finest heavy cavalry in the Warhammer world, but while they're decent in melee, they are by no means slouches, heavy armor, high weapon skill, swords, pretty damn good. They are no blood knights in grindy melee, though they'll probably come out on top against Empire heavy cavalry. And with that charge, oh lord. The Dragon Princes don't need to break the enemy on the charge, but more often than not, they probably will. On the upside though, if you're fighting them, they are somewhat limited in numbers, although not nearly as limited as the Phoenix Guard White Lions or Swordsmasters of Hoeth. Basically just because there's fewer of them. There's only 60 of them in a unit for standard heavy cavalry sizes. I'd be almost tempted to say 40, but yeah, I'll give you 60 because they look fantastic. And I know that the fact that the unit looks fantastic might not be the best way of balancing an army, but by gods, it's the one I'm going to be choosing for the time being. They do also have a few interesting special rules. Now, in previous incarnations, they were just flat out immune to fire damage, just they didn't give a shit. These days, they're not quite immune, they only have a 2+ ward save. So, yeah, at least they're not immune, I suppose. And this makes them into a bit of a nightmare if you're playing Chaos, particularly if you're playing Tzeentch, because a lot of your attacks are flaming, so these guys are just going to laugh at you while they butcher your poor little demons in a very, very one-sided fight indeed. As for numbers and limitations, I have 80 of them because they look fantastic, and limitations-wise, again, I'm probably thinking you can only have about 3 of them, okay? They might be a little bit more common than the White Lions or the Phoenix Guard, but okay, 4. So you can have one big-ass super elite army that has 2 of these bastards on each flank, okay? You happy? Yes, you are. That's probably the furthest I'm going to be willing to go on these particular crazy bastards, because, again, powerful. Okay, let's move on to something a little bit more reasonable, shall we? The Shadow Warriors. The Shadow Warriors are probably the finest skirmishing units in the game, and yeah, I know, it sounds like the High Elves have the best of a lot of things, and yeah, they kinda do, so, you know, just have to bear with it, I suppose. But yeah, they come in at Ballistic Skill 5, so they're Wood Elves level hardcore, but they have one rather considerable advantage over the Wood Elves. Now, they don't have magical bows with magical multi-shot firing arrows, thank the heavens, but they get to be deployed in ambush, which means they get to be deployed behind or on the flanks of the enemy army. I'd like to see that in a Total War game, the ability to call these guys in from the flank or something, because, you know, it'll force you to protect your heavy artillery, because otherwise the Shadow Warriors are going to pop up on the battlefield right behind them and turn them into wonderful little shish kebabs damn near instantly, so you better be prepared for that kind of stuff. And of course, you can put a noble in the unit. If you give him, for example, the Reaver Bow, which I explained previously with the Handmaiden, they get more shots and they get stronger shots. For this unit, when it comes to numbers, I'd probably like to see them at 100, like the other High Elf units. Limitations? Nah, you go ahead, you can have as many Shadow Warriors as you want. It'll be infuriating to fight stacks that has like 6 of these bastards, but at least I can kill them with cavalry, so that's fine. Because at the end of the day, at least they're not Wood Elf level skirmishers, you know, they can shoot like 3 shots a turn. But pound for pound, with no magical arrows and magical doodahs, they are fantastic skirmishers, and they're probably going to be out shooting, well, pretty much anything, with the exception of course, Wood Elves with some proper magical bows and arrows. Next up, we've got Chariot, and I'm going to take both the chariots in much the same breath here, as well, they're chariots. They're relatively similar. I'd like them to operate in much the same way as the Tomb King chariots, with hit and run, where they pass through the unit, turn around, pass through it again, and just keep doing that until they've actually killed the unit, which is going to be a little bit of a bastard to animate, but oh well, that's not my job, thank heavens. I'm just here making suggestions on the internet, because, well, it's a far more comfortable thing to be doing. We have 2 versions. We have the Tyrannoc chariot, which is pulled by elven steeds, making it damn fast. It has a damn good hit. It can have ranged units, it can have spears, so you can have a skirmishing unit of Tyrannoc chariots. And I'd like to see 2 different units of chariots. I'd like to see one unit of like 40 chariots with lighter variants, but they've got an archer in the back, making them really fast, relatively sturdy ranged units. And I'd like to see one of about 40 or 30 chariots, with spears, long spears of course, so you can actually fight out of it, for a more melee-centric role. This would mean that they would be available in far smaller numbers than the Tomb King chariots, which, honestly I think they should, because the Tomb Kings are primarily chariots, so yeah, I think that sounds roughly reasonable. Just give them a little bit more of a niche role so that you actually have to support them rather than relying on them to do all of the job by themselves. However, there is of course one unit that might be able to do the job by itself. It is the other chariot, the White Lion chariot. And yeah, it's a chariot pulled by lions, because why the F not? And it is of course manned by White Lions of Grace. So you've got, two-handed axe-wielding crazy bastards in a chariot pulled by lions. Yeah? It's, pretty insane, to say the absolute least. And I'm kinda wanting to say that this unit shouldn't be the hit-and-run type unit, passing through the units and then turning around. This should be more of a melee chariot. It charges up, the lion starts mauling things, and the dudes on the back start stabbing at things and slashing with his giant-ass axe. And in that way, they'd act more like standard heavy cavalry, really. But with the added impact and the, lions, I probably think you should limit this unit to 20, probably. 20 models. Just because, well, they're that bloody good. You need to have some way of actually beating them before they maul your units, so giving the enemy a proper numerical superiority probably seems like the best way of doing that. And then, for the last of the special units, we have another, technically, chariot. The Lothran Skycutter. So, just in case that you thought that a chariot pulled by lions wasn't quite crazy enough, here we have a flying chariot pulled by an eagle. Because why the hell not at this point, frankly? And I assume you've already spotted the giant-ass bow on the front of this magical being. And yeah, that's essentially a bolt thrower. It's a flying bolt thrower. I just want to make sure that you are realizing what I'm saying here. It is a flying ballista, a flying artillery piece, okay? Are we on the same page on just how insane this actually is? Just imagine, it is a flying bolt thrower. It is an incredibly mobile bolt thrower. This thing can fly down the flanks of the enemy army and just start firing bolts into them, skewering line upon line of valuable infantry. And, well, you're not catching the thing either. How would you actually balance this bastard? I'm not actually honestly sure. Because, well, it's a bolt thrower, which means it's not that fantastic a piece of artillery, but it is a bolt thrower that flies, so, that's a thing. I'd probably say that you could have 2 of them. A unit would consist of 2 of them, and they could fly the bolt thrower like normal, but make the giant-ass bird extremely vulnerable to ranged damage. Make this a unit that you have to babysit and keep out of the range of enemy ranged units. And I'd probably also say that it shouldn't have even the option to do melee fighting, because, well, if you stop the bird, the chariot's gonna crash into the ground, and, it's got wings made of paper. It's not gonna survive that, so it's probably going to have to be a purely mobile artillery platform, rather than a more versatile unit with the option of melee. But on the other hand, it's a flying ballista, so, it's still pretty damn amazing. Not entirely sure that we will see this unit in a Total War game, though, even if they do implement High Elves, just because it's gonna be damn hard to implement, let's just say. Ooh, this is gonna be a long one, isn't it? Okay. Moving on to the rare units, because the special units just weren't hardcore enough. First up, we've got a staple of the High Elf army ever since its earliest incarnation, the High Elf Repeater Bolt Thrower. This is a pretty damn amazing weapon, really. It's fantastic. It fires fast, it fires accurate, it fires large, nice, powerful, armor-piercing bolts. It's got a long range, it has no chance of misfire whatsoever. Even in tabletop, where all other war machines have some chance of misfire, this thing just won't, ever. So yeah, it's amazing. I love it. It's a fantastic unit. And in Total War, I really want it to be represented as that, though. Make it a really fast-firing bolt thrower. Make it fire in volleys. Make it fire 2 or 3 bolts per volley, so it just fires like chuck, 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 nice and fast. And then it has a bit of a reload, where they manually reload all of the bolts, and then it fires again, chuck, 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 you know? And make it a unit 4 able to deliver a ton of punishing firepower. You want to be getting into melee with a High Elf army, despite all of the bullshit units they have, just because you want to knock this thing out. There is of course the potential that it could be horrifyingly overpowered and broken, but it's a High Elf Repeater Bolt Thrower, of course it's going to be overpowered. The rest of the bloody army is already going to be overpowered, so why not just hammer home the final nail, shall we? Oh, and by the way, just before you forget what army we're talking about here, we'll touch upon the Sisters of Avalon, the strongest shooting unit in the game. They've got the best melee unit in the Phoenix Guard, they've got arguably the best monster in the Star Dragon, and they've got the best ranged unit in the Sisters of Avalon. Am I getting across the point yet that the High Elves are pretty damn amazing in tabletop at this point? Am I? Because I'm really damn trying. Anyways, the Sisters of Avalon, they have flaming arrows, which makes them one of very, very few units in Warhammer Tabletop that actually have flaming arrows. Their strength 4 flaming arrows, they've got a 1- armor save to whatever they hit, they've got ballistic skill 5, and of course they fire in 3 rows, so yeah, they're pretty damn insane, and again, they are the bane of big monsters with regeneration. You've got a unit of, let's say, 100 of these, all firing 100 fire arrows that reduce armor and cancels out regeneration. Yeah, they're dangerous, to say the least. But at least they don't have magical arrows that allows them to fire multiple times. Oh wait, the Handmaiden has access to a bow that fires multiple arrows, and allows the unit to move, nope, not even just move, but run and fire. Never mind I said anything, the Sisters of Avalon are insane. This is a ranged unit that I would actually see limited to a single unit, maybe 2, and I'd put them down to 80 models, because they're an infantry unit that can run and fire arrows, okay? It's somewhat ridiculous, I would just say, just a tiny bit ridiculous, yeah. And also, they're female, and, you know, we need to be oppressing them before they take all of the power from us proper menfolk, so yeah, let's keep them at 80 so that they're heavily outnumbered by the rest of the men elf, although, how the hell you can tell a male elf from a female elf at this point, I don't even know. On a more serious point, though, on that one, I would actually like to see all High Elf units to be a mix of females and males, by the way, kind of like they did in Attila, because the High Elves don't discriminate. Everyone has to serve in the army, male or female, so I'd kind of like that, actually, a mix of, a mixed gender unit. Yeah, I'd love to see that. I hope to see that, in fact. Moving on, we have the 2 last units in the High Elf army, and they're both Phoenixes, because why would you not want Phoenixes? You've got the Flame Spire Phoenix and the Frostheart Phoenix. Now, what's so special about the Phoenix, you might ask? Well, it's a decent melee combatant by all the ways and means, weapon skill of 5, strength 5, toughness 5, and 5 wounds, and 3 attacks, so, you know, it'll beat the shit out of many a thing. It is also large and terror-inducing, so yeah, I'd see why. That is a rather scary, burning bird, so yeah, I'd be afraid of that too. But it's not just a fantastic melee unit. The thing is, it's on fire. I know, that seems obvious, but no, it's really on fire, which means that essentially if it flies over a unit, it drops fire on them. It's essentially a Vietnam-era napalm bomber at this stage. And how it works in tabletop is like this. When you move over a unit, you can designate that unit to be the one you're dropping your little napalm bombs on, or fiery bird turds, whichever term you prefer. That unit suffers a d6 strength 4 hits, plus an additional d3 hits per rank after the first. So if you've got a 4 rank unit, then you first roll a d6 for the front rank, then a d3 for each subsequent rank. Which means that if you get lucky with strength 4 hits, which is reasonably likely, you can inflict an absolutely absurd amount of damage on an enemy unit. And seeing as it's toughness 5 with 5 wounds, you are going to have to dedicate quite a bit of firepower to actually bring the bastard down. And additionally, of course, it's a phoenix, which means that if you actually kill the phoenix, it might pop back into being and decide to, you know, violate you some more. Now, this is a dice roll. It's a 1 in 6 chance that the Phoenix will resurrect, so I'd kind of like it to see it as that, as kind of an RNG. Maybe a 10% chance, for example, that if you kill the Phoenix, it's got 10% chance of reincarnating. It'd probably be okay, but on the other hand, it's a very powerful unit, so the fact that it even has the ability to just, you know, pop back from the dead is certainly something you can argue about when it comes to balance, but yeah, I think you could probably get away with a 10% chance of reincarnating. As to unit size, I kind of want to see this thing also be limited. Like, give this to your Anointed Venerian special character, of which you get like 1. So, you've got a Phoenix, he's being ridden by a special character who's kick-ass in melee, and that's about it, you know? It's a cool unit. But I don't know if you want to be able to have multiple of them, because, you know, they're napalm bombers. If you could have a ton of these, I imagine they would break the game very, very, very quickly indeed. So, I'd like to see it as a special unit that you get given due to some event, or maybe carrying out some particularly big quest, like taking a large city or something like that. I'd probably prefer it that way. And it's the same for the Frostheart Phoenix. The Frostheart Phoenix is essentially a very old phoenix. As it grows older, the flame starts to peter out, and it becomes a Frostheart. It actually starts radiating cold, so that's how cold it's actually gotten. It's essentially, in many cases, a bigger, badder Phoenix, really, because remember, Phoenix had strength 5, toughness 5, 5 wounds. The Frostheart has 6 strength, 6 toughness, 5 wounds, and 1 additional attack, giving it 4 attacks total. And again, it is also terror-inducing. But it doesn't have napalm bones. However, that's not really that big of a problem because it's got a couple other interesting abilities. First of all is its natural ice armor, which gives it a 5+ armor save, which is not to be sniffed at, but the real big thing is the fact that it has a so-called blizzard aura, which means that any enemy unit in base contact with Frostheart Phoenix has the always strikes last special rule and suffers -1 to their strength. Which means that if you charge this into a unit of goblins, for example, they're going to be hitting you back at strength 1, meaning they are incapable, completely incapable of hurting the Phoenix. Not just it's hard, it's just they can't do it. So it is a fantastic unit, and it's a fantastic support unit. Like, if you make any enemy unit within a certain range of the Frostheart Phoenix take a minus to their attack, it could be a fantastic support unit. Charge the enemy units with your White Lions of Krace, for example, then send this thing in, and suddenly your White Lions are essentially toughness 4, because the enemy attacked has been reduced by so much. As for limitations, again, I'd like to see just one of these. I'd like to see you have an event, a quest chain maybe, like take particularly well-defended enemy cities, for example. or maybe kill X amount of enemy units, or do something a little bit interesting, a little bit hard for a quest. Once you've completed the quest, you get 2 special characters. You get a Phoenix ridden by a chosen Venerian, and you get a Frostheart Phoenix ridden by another Phoenix god, giving you 2 extremely powerful units without completely and utterly, I hope, breaking the game. Okay, that's all of the units done with. So, as you might have been able to guess at this point, the High Elf army could potentially be a little bit of a balance problem if you're going to be keeping them true to fluff, so I'm not entirely sure how they're going to be implementing them, although I would like to see them on the tabletop, or sorry, the game, I mean, because, again, and I keep harping on this, they look fantastic. Normally, I'm not the biggest fan of the pointy-eared freaks, but they just look so good. You want an entire army of these on the battlefield. I mean, entire army. 40-odd units, a double stack of beautiful high elves with their shining armor glinting in the sunlight. It would look fantastic, and I'd really, really like to see it in Total War Warhammer. Well, we know we won't see it in Total War Warhammer 1, but I have hopes for an expansion. I'm thinking that the High Elves and the Dark Elves are probably a shoe-in for the second expansion. The first, of course, having to be the Skavens, with Bretonia tagging along, and probably the Wood Elves, but we definitely need to see the High Elves and the Dark Elves in Total War game, definitively, so I hope we will have that be a reality. Until next time, I have been Arch, thank you very much for listening, and have a good day.